Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
You've just hosted the big UK regulators and unveiled an action plan to cut red tape. I know you don't mind being called ruthless, so I want to ask how serious you are about this plan. If the regulators don't boost growth, would you abolish them or would you sack their bosses, for example?
We've already made some substantial changes on regulation. Last week, the Prime Minister announced that we're going to be getting rid of NHS England, the biggest quango in the world. We announced last week getting rid of the payment systems regulator, and just today the merger of the community interest companies regulator into Companies House. So you can see that this government are determined to make it easier for businesses to do business in the UK, to get building and to get on with things. Overburdensome regulation, overlapping regulation has held back Britain for too long, and we're determined to turn that around.
Well, what's the metric for success here? How soon and how much do you expect this to boost GDP?
Well, we've made a commitment to reduce the regulatory burden, the administrative burden, by 25% during the course of this Parliament. That's across all regulators, whether it is in the environment or financial services, right across the economy. And that is to meet our ambition to grow the economy, to make working people better off, and to make our country and our economy more competitive. So next week, the new growth forecast will be published by the Office of Budget Responsibility. But this is just one of a range of measures, along with the Planning and Infrastructure Bill that was published last week, the Pensions Bill, which is coming soon, to turn around the lacklustre growth performance that has affected the UK for far too long.
Well, the OECD published its forecast today. It's cut its growth forecast for this year and next. Do you accept responsibility for that, or is it all the fault of Donald Trump and the Conservatives?
Well, if you look at what the OECD have done today, they have downgraded most major economies' growth forecasts. The UK is not immune from those global headwinds. But if you look at the forecast for next year for the UK, we're forecast to be the second fastest growing economy in the G7. That is up from the third fastest the last time they published their forecasts. But if you're asking, am I happy with those numbers? Of course not. I want to see the UK economy create more jobs, create more prosperity, to lift the living standards of working people. And that's what this regulatory drive is all about, unlocking growth, making it easier to do business in Britain.
Well, what I'm asking is, do you accept any responsibility for the downgrade? Is it anything to do with your gloomy messaging or your tax rises in the October budget?
Well, of course, there are costs from any measures on tax, but there are also costs of irresponsibility. And if in the budget last year I hadn't have dealt with the £22 billion black hole that I'd inherited from the Conservatives, if I hadn't have put our public finances on a firm footing, then we wouldn't have been able to increase defence spending in the way that we did just a couple of weeks ago, and we wouldn't be able to weather the global economic headwinds.
Yeah.
So we made the right decisions in that budget to return stability to the economy. And since the general election, of course, there's been 3 cuts in interest rates, only possible because we've returned stability to the economy.
But do you regret not giving yourself more breathing space against your fiscal rules at the time of the October budget?
Well, in October, we set the fiscal rules for this Parliament that we would balance day-to-day spending with tax receipts, that we would get debt down as a share of GDP. But significantly, we changed the way that we measured investment. So for the first time ever, we count the benefits of investment, not just the costs. And because of that, we were able to invest an additional £100 billion during the course of this Parliament in capital projects, transport, digital, energy, and of course, housing. That's pro-business, that's pro-growth, and it's pro-working people.
But I suppose what I'm saying is, isn't it the job of a responsible Chancellor to build an adequate safety cushion into the public finances so that you can weather the sort of changing world that you've been talking about in recent weeks?
Well, we inherited from the previous government not just a big black hole in the public finances, but the lowest ever fiscal headroom. We increased that headroom in the budget last October because it is important that there is headroom against the shocks that we face. But the fiscal rules we've set are the right ones. They are a robust set of fiscal rules, but it is important that we balance day-to-day spending with tax receipts and that we get debt down as a share of GDP. Those are the right fiscal rules for the circumstances that we face. But when we're spending £100 billion a year on servicing government debt, I don't think anyone could seriously argue that we don't need to get a grip of government borrowing and government debt.
Just finally, Chancellor, ahead of your March 26th spring statement, the Cabinet's urging you to reconsider plans for welfare cuts. Some of them want you to raise tax or loosen the fiscal rules instead. Would you consider either?
We need to reform the benefit system. I don't think anyone seriously believes that the system is working for working people, for taxpayers, or indeed those people in receipt of benefits. We're not doing nearly enough to help people back into work. We've got 1 in 8 young people not in education, employment or training. And every day an additional 1,000 people are going on to personal independence payments, disability benefits. That is not sustainable. And those people are often trapped out of work on welfare, not being able to realise their potential. I want to help people to fulfil their potential, to get the targeted support they need, where possible, to get back into work, whilst always supporting those who can't.